Thank you everyone for coming out on a lovely humid Melbourne evening. It probably bodes well for the summer. I think we're going to have a humid summer again, but anyway, that's okay. I'd love to welcome Barbara Hermon to In Conversation this evening. It's such a treat to have Barbara come in. And we've all been really looking forward to speaking to her. I know that. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being on time, and thank you all for being quiet. Well done. So I'm going to ask a series of questions to Barbara. It'll be about a half-hour session, and then we can have some more drinks and nibbles afterwards. It's a very casual conversation chat. We're going to try and get to know Barbara a little bit better than we already do in Melbourne. So we're going to start with the first question. I'd like to say I've been to parties all of my life, and sometimes there's someone in the room that walks into that room and everyone just looks at them and goes, wow, who is that person? I want to meet that person. And to me, Barbara is like that person. Whenever she's walked into the greenery, there's a change in the air, a change in the atmosphere. It's just this compelling looking person, but also an energy and a joie de vivre about her. That's what I know, but I'd like Barbara just to give a bit of a background to her career and the stores that she's had and the places that she's worked, the places we'll talk about travel a bit later, but if you could just give us a bit of a background, Barbara.
Well, it started not probably, 1967, and probably a lot of people here weren't even born then, but anyway, I decided to open up a homeware store in Geelong. And it was the first store to open selling Swedish glassware, had grass matting on the floor, etc., etc. And it was and they said, oh, give her a couple of months and she'll be closed down. I lasted just over 3 years at that, because women would come in every day just about and look at my left hand and say, oh, darling, are you engaged yet? Are you going steady? I have to introduce you to a nice boy on Saturday, come for tea. And after 3 years, I thought, no. Because in Geelong in those days, if you weren't married with a couple of children, it was like, you're on the shelf. So I moved to Melbourne. One of the people I was buying from was a company called Trade Action, who had shops called Handicrafts of Asia, which was owned by Community Aid Abroad. And I got a job working in the showroom. They wanted somebody who'd had myriad training, and I said, look, I've had my own business for 3 years. Anyway, they obviously couldn't get anybody else, so they took me. Then I had an opportunity, not very long in the job, to go to Russia, and I'd always had a desire to go to Russia. I went to my boss and I said, Mr. Webb, he said, go to Russia, let us know when you finish travelling. Anyway, they contacted me about 8 to 10 months later when I was overseas. We're setting up the buying department at Trade Action. Would you come back and be part of the buying department? I said, okay. So we set up I was the homewares buyer, and Mary Jean Hunter was the clothing buyer. And I travelled 10 weeks at the beginning of the year, 10 weeks at the end of the year, around the world to developing countries on my own, buying handicrafts we had 25 stores Australia-wide and 5 wholesale outlets. And then one day I said to my boss, Mr. Webb, I often find one of this and one of that, and I can't spread it between 25 stores. How about we open up a specialty store? He said, you come back with the idea, where and what and all that. So I said, High Street Armadale, we'll call it Myriad. And he said, okay, open it. So we opened Myriad on High Street Armadale. I think that was 1973, and which was quite, as I say, we used to have great exhibitions and, as I say, limited edition items. Trade Action Handicrafts of Asia was an amazing company to work for, and I could tell you some really strange stories, because being 25-ish and travelling to Pakistan, Ethiopia, Iran, China on your own, I had some very, very interesting experiences, brothels, the whole lot. I didn't do any work at the brothels, but somehow, anyway, long stories, but it was quite interesting. When I look back at it now and think, anyway. So 1977, Mr. Webb, who started Handicrafts of Asia, was retiring, and I said to John, my husband, I said, as soon as he retires, the company will change, and it did change. So I resigned, and we went to live in Greece for a few years, where my sister still lives. And we stayed there for a while. Then in winters we go to London or French countryside, which all sounds fantastic, but John makes a joke that that was our retirement. We sort of had our retiring time in Greece. Met some amazing people, amazing people. And then we came back to Melbourne, and there was an amazing friend of mine, Bruce Chinnery, who was working at David Jones at the time, and he said, Dole, come to David Jones and I'll get you a job there. And I said, David Jones department store? And he said, yes, it'll get you back into the industry. So I went back, came in, spoke to Mr. Torrance, the managing director. He said, what would you like? And he said, fashion. I said, no. So they had this soft furnishings department, which is a bit tragic, and they're in the process of moving to the Burke Street store. And I set up the decorator department there and then took over furniture. But then it was just working in the department store was constantly, it was hard work because I was trying to make things different, and David Jones Sydney had sort of set rules about how the fabric should be displayed. And anyway, so in the end of '89, we decided to open up Hermon and Hermon, which was originally going to be homewares, wholesale homewares. And so I still had contacts in India. So we started doing that, and then we were running out of space. So we had a little place in Waltham Street off Bridge Road in Richmond. We needed some more space, and John found a space on Swan Street. It was divided up into a whole lot of cubicles, and we went down there, knocked down all the cubicles, and we looked at this is a very good business plan. I said, oh my gosh, big windows, maybe we should go retail. So we had all these people knocking on the windows saying, so we then sort of, as I say, no business plan, so we opened Hermon and Hermon. And, we 7 days a week, hard work. People used to say, oh my God, you travel and you go overseas and you have a divine time, and it was hard work. And we did that until, 8 years ago? Our accountant wanted to work out a business plan, wanted to work out what the building was worth. Anyway, cut a long story short, we had 10 people wanting to buy the building, and we weren't planning on selling. And I said to John, why don't we shut up shop and get a life? Because 7 days a week, we never seemed to go out because we're always working, or I was travelling, or trade shows or whatever. So we shut up shop 8 years ago. Yes. So
that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yes.
When you talk about Hermon and Hermon, it's one of those stores that I think people always remember going there. And if you went there, you always wanted to go back to it. It was just a place that it's a bit similar to here, in that customers would come in, I imagine. I know I did, and I thought I just need a Hermon and Hermon shop. I just need to go in and see something beautiful and see how they've displayed something.
When we opened, funnily enough, when we opened in Richmond, everybody said, why would you open in Richmond? There aren't any homeware stores in Richmond, my God. And we chose Richmond because we thought it was a great, it was a place for people to come from different suburbs. And then, of course, now it's chock-a-block with furniture and homewares. But it was, and interestingly, we still get people emailing and phoning regularly saying, where do I go now to get this or that? Anyway, it's changed. A big loss, I think. It was one of those iconic Melbourne stores, I have to say. Thank you. We don't miss it.
No, other people miss it.
People rush up to us still now and they say, how are you enjoying retirement? I said, oh, we haven't retired. We're getting a life. Anyway, yes.
I'm interested about why you wanted to go to Russia, and that leads into a bit of a travel. Like, is travelling for work ever tiresome, or is it?
Yes,
it is. Okay.
Interestingly, 25 years of going to the Philippines, because that was our main source of supply. I'd go 2 or 3 times a year to trade shows, and people would still say to us, where do we go for a holiday in the Philippines? Oh, I don't know. What do you mean? Haven't you been for I said, no. And I remember taking Christopher Elliott, who worked with us in the early days, and and he'd say, oh, God, you work hard when you come here, don't you? And I said, well, what do you think I do? Where's the swimming pool? I said, I don't know. And it's, because you'd go, I mean, I remember going to Maison Objet when it first started in Paris years ago. And you'd go there and you had 4 days, bang, 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 bang. It just didn't stop. You know, you had to. You know, yes, it was hard work. It was, and as I say, we still haven't had a holiday in the Philippines. So,
but travelling for pleasure, what would be some of your favourite countries or places?
Well, it's interesting when you asked me that question. I mean, we absolutely adore Italy. We were there this time 5 years ago for the Biennale, the Art Biennale, which we absolutely adore. Love, love, love Venice. And people go, you like Venice? Anything in Italy, we were there, as I say, for about a month this time 5 years ago. Italian people, Italian food, spaces, divine, divine. Venice is divine, Kyoto is divine in Japan. There are lots of places that are divine. Love Morocco. Went there when I turned my 60th birthday, we went there and had a divine time. But when you ask what's my favourite city, do you know what? Melbourne. Because when we were deciding to come back to Australia in 89, no, sorry, 84, 85, Melbourne, and now, I mean, with the galleries we've got, the restaurants we have, we have absolutely everything here. I mean, I remember years ago, I don't know whether Mary Portis, who used to do shopping, she and Lee Edelcourt were invited to come out here as part of Melbourne Fashion Week. And they were being interviewed on Radio National, and they said, oh, well, we thought we'd go to Melbourne because, you know, what would they know in Melbourne? And, you know, and they said on the radio, we came here and we were blown away with what Melbourne had to offer. And that's when Lee Edelcourt employed Karen Webster as her Australian contact. And we do have, when you look at what we have in the way of galleries or restaurants or sport, you know, we're way ahead of Sydney. I mean, a driver used to pick me up from when I'd go to Sydney for work. I said, oh, I don't know, George, you know, Sydney. He said, let's face it, Barbara, take away the harbour and what have they got? And when those design weeks were on in Melbourne, we used to get all the designers down from Sydney because they say, we come to Melbourne because you've got it all here. And we do have it here.
Barbara, where were you born? Were you born
Geelong?
Yeah.
I didn't wear my Geelong scarf tonight.
That's okay.
To gloat on
Congratulations, by the way.
Yes, born in Geelong.
Yeah, I love that you say you love Melbourne. That is such a great answer because I think people, when I was growing up, and I had a few friends in Sydney, and they just seemed so much more sophisticated and worldly. And I was in little Melbourne that didn't really do much, but I was inside. It was like an inside, cosy, warm, and then it became so intellectual and so interesting, and the bands that came in from here, the music,
yes,
you know,
absolutely.
and then that's when my friends from Sydney started saying, oh, I really like Melbourne. Melbourne is where things happen.
There's a friend of ours said to us some years ago, she's from Melbourne, she worked in Sydney for a while, and she said, you know what, my acquaintances are in Sydney, but my friends are in Melbourne. And it's quite, I hope there's nobody here from Sydney.
It's okay. Yeah, that's lovely. There was that real Sydney-Melbourne thing, but I've really forgotten about that now. I agree. I think Melbourne is absolutely fantastic. Walking around the city is just so interesting. Do you have any buildings or organisations that you really love in Melbourne that you love to look at or go to?
Well, today we actually went to see what was the documentary we went to see today? The City of Melbourne? No. The Story of Melbourne. I don't know whether you've heard about this documentary came out of the Melbourne Film Festival, and it's talking about how we've demolished Melbourne, whole buildings. It's a fantastic documentary if you can go and see it. Because apparently in the mid-19th century, Melbourne was considered to be way ahead of many cities in the world. And then the turn of the century, and then towards, I think the early 70s, they said that a lot of the demolition was done. And it's quite sad, but then, I don't know, there's still a lot. I mean, the NGV, I remember coming up to, catching the train up from Geelong as a junior member to go to the opening of the NGV. I mean, look what we've got there. I mean, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So we're involved with the NGV, and we find that absolutely...
Some friends of mine came to visit from Italy, and their father had been living here before they were born, and they'd heard all their life, they were in their 30s, about how wonderful Melbourne was. He loved it. And we went to the art gallery and had afternoon tea, that beautiful tea place, and he pulled me aside, the young man, and said, "Kelly, I cannot believe that you don't have guards everywhere. There's not security everywhere. You can actually walk up to a painting or a sculpture." And he said, "This is incredible." And I said, "A little bit, yeah, not all the time, but I said, I think it's a bit of our appreciation of art, our respect, but also our real acceptance and being comfortable with it." It was a real compliment. I thought, I'm really happy that he saw that and feels like that. Yeah, so it was beautiful. They just adored Melbourne. It's just, I mean, one of their favourite places is all the laneways, and they got to a laneway, then they were laughing, and they said, "Oh, you don't understand. This is called after a band." I said, "Yeah, AC/DC Lane," and that was one of their favourite bands, being from Italy, and they were just absolutely delighted that we do that sort of stuff. We put it out there, I reckon. Yeah. And we wear black, so
yes,
I think that's really wonderful.
Absolutely, totally,
yeah.
totally.
Yeah. And I'd like to know, you've been in amazing businesses, and you have this amazing eye as well. Do you have any sayings or mantras, or you were talking about meditation before? Is there anything that you, like any sayings that you love that you use in your life or that pop up every now and again?
Well, there's one funny saying that Mr. Torrance, who was the managing director at David Jones in the 80s, he said to me one day, Mrs. Hermon, he has a very strong Scottish accent, I won't try and put that on. He said, "Mrs. Hermon, we must have ooh-ah." And I said, "Ooh-ah?" And he said, "Yes, you might put something on the floor that's, you know, ooh-ah, oh," and people get, "Oh," you might end up marking it down and selling it, you know, sale price, but it's created ooh-ah. And it's amazing the number of times that when you tell people about ooh-ah, they go, "Yes, I can relate, yeah, ooh-ah."
Yep.
And it's, I know it's a funny saying, but I often Mr. Torrance passed away many years ago, sadly. But when I think of ooh-ah, the other one that I think is strong is go by your gut feeling. I feel very strongly, but, you know, if you think my gut says yes, I should do that, or I think that's, and the other one is the Italian saying piano piano, slowly slowly. I don't know. I don't really have any amazing sayings, but.
No,
yes,
that's great. I can really see the ooh-ah, definitely.
Seriously, if you think of, I remember, you know, sometimes we do things in the window. I say, you know, I was actually walking past Hampstead Flowers on Bridge Road the other day, and I went in to say hello to Jane, and I said we were talking about the window display, and I said, sometimes don't always have flowers in the window, because people go, "Oh, yes, you know," but if you put something that's, it's the florist, you know, it's like moving stock around in your store. Changing your departments in the store, because people walk in and they don't, and you move the, "Oh, I didn't know you sold artwork." You know, it's just, it's making, but it's putting something in the window that's great. I remember one day we put 2 naked models in the window sitting on Kenneth Copenpoint's amazing furniture. I mean, they were discreetly cut, but it was a tram stop beside, and people go, they sell lighting. You know, and as I say, just to make it sort of, yes, conversation.
Yeah. Hampstead Flowers, I have got the tram past then, and I do look in the window to see what they're doing, because they have done some things that they were one of the first florists I saw use cotton, which is quite popular now, actual cotton, that's on sticks, and they've made an amazing display in their window. And that just made me look at that and think,
She's
there's
a
a
clever
florist.
young girl. Yes, because there's actually an amazing dried piece that she has in the Lycon Deli further down the road.
Okay, right.
That from Jane at Hampstead Flowers. No, she's, yes.
When you're talking about all these places, I went to Lycon Deli on Monday for breakfast. Yeah, and it's fantastic. Like, we're so lucky to have all these things, that we're very social people, and we love coffee, but there's so many other things that we have the opportunity to go to. Do you buy your flowers from Hampstead Flowers or at any other stores?
Varzette.
Okay, yeah.
Cherie from Varzette.
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
So in
Varzette's
fact, John
incredible.
bought me this beautiful bunch of green flowers from Hampstead today.
Okay.
And the way she ties it up with the string and then a little bit of greenery, it's
that attention to detail is incredible.
Totally.
And congratulations, Varzette put out a bouquet. They were celebrating an International Women's Day earlier this year, and you had a bouquet named after you. Do you remember that? It was earlier on in March, and it pops up on my inbox, and I had a look, and I said to everyone, have a look. Barbara Hermon's got a bouquet, and it was beautiful. And it was nothing black and nothing red, but it was just, it was like this. It was absolutely beautiful.
Sherry's a gorgeous girl who's done it amazing.
Yeah.
It's been over 30, must be 30 plus years now that she's been in business.
Yes. Varzette's another store like Hermon and Hermon that I just think I'm so happy it exists. Yeah, every now and again you go for a little fix there, and I love it because it's on Brunswick Street and it has some unusual customers go in.
What did something came up today on Time Out that Brunswick Street's been named, or Fitzroy's been named the top suburb in. Yes, I quickly saw it today. Yes, and it was Brunswick Street. Yes, that's right. The coolest, thank you.
Wow.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, when I saw it, photograph of Brunswick Street, I thought, oh my gosh, fantastic.
Yeah, it's been like that for many years, I think, and it had a bit of a slowdown, but it's still fantastic. Yeah. Talking about different parts of Melbourne as well. Do you have a favourite performing arts that you like to go to?
We are great lovers of concerts, as in. We've been to. I'm actually wondering who's going to come. We've been to people like, Leonard Cohen until he passed away. Leonard Cohen, Rolling Stones, Sade, Grace Jones. We've been to some. John's going to remind. Queen last year. Queen was Adam Lambert. No, we absolutely love going to concerts. And but unfortunately, I don't know when anyone here knows Eros Ramazzotti, an Italian singer. He's been out twice, and we're actually at a little Italian restaurant last night, and the chap said, I think he's coming out again. I said, but usually if you ask an Italian youngish person, they say, oh, my grandmother. There you go, okay, fine. So, no, but concerts and... Yes, mainly concerts. Sporting, no, only if it's Geelong playing. And John goes to see his Hawthorn. So, but it's concerts absolutely love.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I thought you were going to say ballet or music. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm a big band fan as well. I think it's really important. And
also get up and have a scream and a yell and I mean Queen concert with Adam Lambert, it was nearly 3 years ago. It was the beginning. Yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. It was at Amy Park, and I was I'd had surgery on my leg and I was on crutches. And as soon as they saw me on crutches, they rushed me through the sort of, I thought, John said, perhaps you can stay on crutches all the time and get priority to get in the other door. No concerts, ballet a million years ago, theatre not so much. Although we went to see, what was the amazing one we went to see with the one girl, Dorian Gray. Did anybody see that?
I've heard.
Wasn't it brilliant? Absolutely riveting. She'd have to get some sort of award for that because it was so incredible.
And sporting, let's just mention Geelong. Because to me that is a performing art as well. I think I watch them play and I think this reminds me of the ballet. They're incredibly fit, they know where their bodies are at all times usually.
Except where was Buddy that day? I don't know.
So just how did you spend the grand final day? Did you go to the game?
No, because we lived almost beside the MCG and I prefer to watch it on television because on television I think you can see it more clearly. And all the crowds. We went there on the Thursday before the holiday and it was so fantastic to see the park filled with kids with their, it was actually eye-watering because everybody was out having a great time and it was just great to see people out enjoying. But the funny thing is people say, it must be very noisy. We hear the siren, and we heard the fireworks, but we didn't hear anything else. But then a few years ago I said to John, somebody must be having a wild party. Anyway, it was Bruce Springsteen down at Amy Park and we could hear that at our place, but we couldn't hear the football. I don't know, but anyway.
I used to live in Richmond, but it's Abbotsford. But when I'd walk to work to get the train on a Friday morning during football season, they must have been testing the siren. So they'd blast it twice at about 8 o'clock. And I thought, football, like, come on. But I texted a friend and told her that, and she's Carlton. And she said, oh, I just love that. If you told anyone in Melbourne that you're hearing that MCG siren on your way to work, they would love that. So, and I love cricket, but I think that ground is absolutely beautiful. It's such an amazing stadium. The turf is incredible. I just think, look.
I know, it's again something fantastic for Melbourne. You know, we're very,
and it's
that whole precinct now with the tennis centre and all of it, you know, it's really, as long as they don't go ahead with building it, somebody's been putting permits in to build beside Wellington Parade, but I think it's been stopped, hasn't it? It's been stopped, there we go. Anyway, the only problem is, the only good thing is about, it's been locked down for the last 3 years, all the possums stayed in the park because nobody was parking in the park. As soon as people came back, the possums then came to our courtyard. And
with your courtyard, do you ever any plants in your courtyard that you love, like favourite plants?
Well, tell you what, there are 3 olive trees that we purchased from Barry about 30 years ago. They were outside Hermon and Hermon on Swan Street for all those years. And when we sold, I said the olive trees are coming with us, so they're in our back courtyard. And they seem to be very happy there. And we had an amazing, amazing crop of olives one year. And I went out there one day and I went, what's all over the ground? Pips. I thought, bloody possums. And I was speaking to my Greek brother-in-law and he said, are they Greek possums you've got there? And I said, but it was really, anyway, we've got the olive trees. We've got jasmine we've bought from you. And I've got a bit of the maple. Yes, sorry, John. Yes, there's 2 maples we've got there. And that was maples from here that we bought when we were in Hosey Street. And I also started collecting quite a few years ago bonsais. But sadly, one year we're away, we're actually having a holiday. Somebody looked after the bonsais and happened to, don't know what they did, but the old ones died. And that was because bonsais, you have to keep them wet. So my bonsais. So, but the courtyards, we're very lucky because there's 2 beautiful courtyards. And the olive trees are very, very happy there.
Lovely.
And as I said, it must be 30 years old. Or 30 years ago that we bought them here.
How did you meet Barry? Do you remember?
Just coming here. Just coming here. And then he used to come to our events, our Hermon and Hermon events.
Barry, one day I was lucky enough he mustn't have been able to make it to like a yearly event at your store, and so he gave the tickets to me and one of the other staff, Rowan, and we got dressed up and went down there and we had a wonderful time. I still remember some of the items. There were these beautiful Japanese jewellery boxes, I think, that you had. But I remember as you walked through the door, you were handed a glass of champagne and a ticket, and that ticket could have won you $1,000 gift voucher to spend on the evening, and unfortunately the man behind me won that. And I thought, if only I'd gone, like not walked in so quickly. And then Rowan and I had a lovely time imagining what we would have spent it on, and it was always for me your bed linen. You had amazing bed linen and just beautiful, and I said, but $1,000, that wouldn't go very far. But anyway, it was such an event and Barry was, he was always with his staff. He had football season tickets, and if he couldn't make it, he'd give those to staff. So he's always very generous about things like that. And he always loved that event. So I'm not surprised.
Whenever we'd come here, if he wasn't on the floor, we'd say, "Where's Barry?" You know, he'd always come out and say hello. Absolutely.
Yeah, delightful. Just talking about people that you've met in your life, is there anyone that you've been a mentor to you, or anyone that's really stuck in your mind? Any particular person or boss or?
Well, Mr. Torrens at David Jones was amazing because he let me have basically free hand, which was quite unusual because David Jones was very set in their rules and regulations about how departments should be set up. No, I'm just trying to think of who would be. There was somebody that John met. Who did you suggested somebody as we were driving out here? No, but I suppose there's been lots of. I mean, I like the Japanese architect Tadao Ando. Well, he's actually not an architect. He's actually I think he was a wrestler or a boxer. Or he didn't study. Okay. Anyway, he's designed amazing buildings on.
There's a group of creatives in the Philippines.
Oh yes.
Yep.
Yes. The people we. Yes. John, do you want to come here and have a... yes, as John said, that the people that we work with, because a lot of people used to say to us, oh, why don't you go to China and have them copied in China? I said, no, because we really persevered with the Philippines. You know, I remember there was a Palladio chair that we had made, and we persevered, making sure there was a stackable chair, nylon glides, we just persevered. And I'll never forget, quite a few years ago, Neil Whittaker at the time was editor of Bell magazine. And I'd had a falling out with the previous editor who was a bit of a... Anyway, Neil Whittaker came down to Melbourne to schmooze us. And he said, I've got an idea, I'd like to come to the Philippines with you, bring a photographer and we'll do a story. And I said, okay, fine. So he came with us. He did a 10-page story in Bell magazine. And a lot of people said, oh, why on earth did you tell everybody about all your suppliers? I said, because we want to promote the Philippines. And when he got there, he was a bit blown away because the designers we worked with, I mean, Kenneth Copenpue, amazing furniture, lighting, whatever. Tony Gonzalez, amazing, beautiful Tess Pasola, who we had a paper exhibition of hers, which was spectacular. She sadly passed away 3 weeks ago, breast cancer, which was very sad. But the people we worked with there, they were just. In fact, I got an email the other day from the Philippine Trade Office in Sydney saying, about the trade show that's happening now in the Philippines, and I said, look, thank you so much for keeping, because they could see that I've obviously been checking things on their site. They're incredibly creative, and the quality of product, the materials they use, amazing. And we persevered. Sometimes it was, you think, oh my gosh, but the product that we got was well worth it.
I love how when you speak you say we all the time. Some people I've met in my life, I've seen them as, I haven't seen them as a couple, I haven't seen them as two people, I've seen them definitely as separate people. But I do love seeing you and John walk around, and the way you obviously adore each other and love each other, but it's that respect as well. And
47 years I've had to put up with Hawthorne
I love those relationships. I love the respect in a relationship. And how did you meet John?
Well, funny story. When I went to Russia, my mother used to go to, in those days they were called podiatrists, and my mother said, oh, when you come back, my podiatrist wants to meet you and introduce you to some young men in Melbourne. And I went, oh yeah, okay, whatever. Anyway, got back to Melbourne and we went out, in those days it was the Toc H Hotel in Toorak. We went out for dinner to the Toc H, and then we went to this party afterwards in Domain Road to this chap called John Hermon. And Judy was quite funny. She said, no, darling, no, don't talk to him. He's from the wrong side of town. No, not him. No. Oh, he's not bad. And she sort of went round the room sort of checking out. Anyway, I met John, so, and it, yes.
Yeah.
And but interestingly, on the night, there was a French ski instructor there, Swiss ski instructor. And he was really appealing and he wanted to take me out. He was staying with John. And I said, oh, okay, I'll go out with the Swiss. And then I was a bit frightened, so I said, I'd only met John, I said, will you come with us? Because I'm a bit frightened. Well, lucky we did, because we went to the Toc H again, and every woman at the Toc H, oh, Pierre, darling, hello, how are you, darling? And I thought, oh, well, lucky John was here, because Pierre was off chatting to all the women who, yes. Yeah. So that's how we met.
That's lovely, yeah. Congratulations on...
John?
Do you remember where your first date was, or where you went out, or was it that date with two men?
Probably the date with two men, yes.
Yeah, good.
I can't remember. Oh, and then that's right. Then I was with David Jones and I was going to Greece. I'd worked really hard. And I was taking some time off to go to Greece. And then John and his mates said, oh, we're going to Greece too. I said, where are you going? Oh, Skiathos, this is where my sister lives. And I say they followed me, but anyway, we all ended up going to Sciathos, and then we ended up going to Italy together. And there was a group. There was 3 or 4 of us, and I was the one carrying the bag with all the passports in it, because I was, the secure bags, and make sure that the passports weren't stolen.
Not the money.
Not the money, just the documents. That's right.
Yeah. Just a last little thing to talk about. The sign has been moved, and I'm wondering if, Lucy, you could just turn this sign around that we've been using as a backdrop for this setting here. When we asked Barbara to send us some photographs for online and this signage, she sent 2 in her hallway, I think at home, and I'm just looking at all the objects in the background, and then this one popped up, and it was a bit of the, what was the phrase, the ooh-ah,
Ooh-ah.
Yeah, I looked and said, Corey, come and have a look at this, and Corey came behind me and he said, that's it. And we just love that it's so dramatic, so beautifully lit.
Is that the one?
It's Otafuku.
Yes, because Robert Piccioli, who's a photographer who's based in Richmond, he asked 3 years ago to take our photographs. And we sort of, okay, fine. He's taken different, anyway. He said, I'll bring along something, bring 2 outfits and bring something you like. So I thought I fell in love with Otafuku. She's sort of the good time girl who apparently makes people happy. And she also makes all her husbands happy. All her husbands happy. And she's supposed to be the good time girl. Anyway, John bought that mask for me some years ago from Kazari. Okay. I'm not allowed to go near Kazari because it's dangerous. And that's at Otafuku, yes.
That's beautiful.
So when Robert Piccioli took the photograph, I was holding Otafuku. Yes.
It's lovely. It could be an Opera Australia program cover. Like, it is so dramatic and gorgeous.
These are great. They're amazing. I don't know whether anybody knows them if you look at them on Instagram, Piccioli Photography, he and his son, they keep on winning international awards for their photographs. And interestingly, there used to be an amazing bootmaker in Richmond, Felix, a Russian bootmaker, who was the best bootmaker you could ever come across. And he did it. Robert took the most fantastic photograph of him. Sadly, Felix got cancer early this year and was very quickly, sadly, passed away. And a couple of weeks ago, Robert put the photograph up and it won an award in Italy. And I contacted Felix's daughter and said, look, Felix's photographs won an award in Italy, how divine. But when you look at his photographs, they're quite interesting. There might be somebody with a dog, somebody with a kid, with children, grandchildren, whatever. He's very, very, very interesting photographer. Actually, originally from Geelong, strangely enough. All family was Italian, but he grew up in Geelong. So,
did he contact you to take that photo because he thought you were very photogenic, or you were someone from the area?
He'd been asking us for some years. He wanted to take a photo because we've been in the area for so many years, and. Yeah, I'm not sure. I just think he wanted us to. And his studio's in Lyndhurst Street. And it's, as I say, when you look at his Instagram page, you can see stunning photographs,
When you sent that photo and I asked you what that mask was, and you said it could represent someone who made their husband very happy, and I said, well, did John give it to you? Because I think he's saying you're making him very happy.
Oh, dear,
it was beautiful.
I didn't know. Yes.
Anyway, that's wonderful.
And I've actually got a print. I've got a couple of things of Otafuku because she's just and Miho-san. I used to do calligraphy classes with Miho Araki when she had a store in Elwood, and she sent me some teacups and then there's Otafuku's just her face, just in the inside of the rim of the teacup. Yes, Otafuku.
I know we're going a bit over, and I've got other questions. That's the thing. I think I know that John is studying art, and he has an art class or teacher. Is there anything, talking about calligraphy? Is there anything that your creative outlet? Do you have? Is it drawing? Is it writing?
Sadly, in my 75 years, the last 3 years have been the most unproductive, uncreative in my entire life. And I get my calligraphy brushes out and the inks out and I look at them and I go, oh yes, and I put them back in the cupboard. And then I don't know, and I'm sure there are many people who felt the same. And then you think, oh, for heaven's sakes, Barbara, you know, and every day I say, we're lucky we don't have the business, we're lucky we have somewhere nice to live, and we're lucky we have each other, but it's just spooky that it's to be inspired and to do something. What I have been wanting to do for many years, when we lived in Japan for 2 years, 1955, 56. My father was sent there to decamp the Australian troops, the occupational troops. And he took 1,000 colour slides. And he sadly was killed 2 days after my 12th birthday. And these colour slides have been sitting in boxes. I scanned them when we went to Japan 9 years ago, and I made some inquiries about having them professionally scanned because I wanted to put them, not that 1,000, but to put them, because it was us living in a Japanese house, you know, my sister going to a Japanese school, Japanese dancing, tea ceremony. Anyway, I contacted Rob Imhoff, put me onto this photography studio, and I got a quote about a couple of weeks ago, $10,000. So I went, no, I don't think so. But my nephew's partner's in a film. We actually had a discussion last night. He's going to try and get somebody to scan them because when I did put them on Instagram, people would say, oh my God, you know, there you are in a kimono or doing Japanese dancing or doing tea ceremony. Oh my God, how old were you? I said I was 9 or 10. So that's a project that I've been trying to work on. And then a couple of people have wanted to me, one of them being Mira Pang. Mira said she wanted me to do a blog, you know, talking about the places that I've travelled to and etc. And then you start writing it down and you think, oh, that's boring. So as I say, to be inspired is the most difficult. And as I say, and I know, you know, there are millions of people out there who are going through 10,000 times worse than that, but it's spooky not to be inspired. I don't know what it is. It's just...
Do you feel, I feel like something will come to you, that something will happen and it'll just open up, and because it's almost like your life cannot be without something that's creative. You have to have it in your life. And has COVID made a difference at all, do you think?
Absolutely,
yeah. Okay,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, I've actually watched a lot of, not a lot, but I don't know whether anybody knows Academy Travel, and they normally do trips to actual places. Well, a couple of years, well, it must be nearly 3 years ago, I started their online lectures, $25. And if you can't see it on that day, you've got 14 days to watch it. And the first one I watched was exploring the Palladio villas in the Veneto region. And each one I've done, I've gone to Veneto region or France, and then an interesting one I did a few months ago was Napoleon's time in Venice. And okay, he stole a lot of artwork, but he also created a lot of amazing space. Anyway, so watching those sorts of things, and then doing my meditation and breathing classes, I think that's... But I think it's been hard for everybody, because I think seeing what so many people are going through has been difficult. Not yourself, but seeing what, you know, people with... I mean, okay, I've during COVID promoted local businesses, you know, Entrecote, our restaurant, you know, and I remember it came up on broadsheet that, I don't know whether anybody knows Justin Hems, who's got hotels and whatever in Sydney, and it came up on broadsheet that Justin Hems was coming to Melbourne to do takeaway food. I thought, bugger you, excuse me. And I shared it on Facebook and I wrote in capitals, stay away, we'll support local. The following week it was decided he wasn't coming. I don't think I had anything, I don't think I had anything to do, but I thought, bugger off, you know. Sorry, I shouldn't be swearing.
That's fine.
But I thought, you know, how dare you? We all support our locals. And I think that was the main thing, is to, you know, to try and promote as much as we could. I mean, we had the first few weeks of COVID, I contacted Toscanos and I said, oh, will you be doing home delivery, seeing we're not allowed out? And they said, oh no, through Instagram, and they said, somebody contacted me, said, oh, my name is Gemma and Ryan, we'll offer to do your shopping every week, deliver it to your door. They paid every Tuesday, they'd send me a message, I'd send them the list, they'd put it on their own credit card, deliver it to our door. 18 months they did that. So we'd give them a Providore voucher or a Meat Smith or whatever, and they said, oh, you're so generous. I said, no. And things like that was just incredible, just incredible. You know, just really, and then when they were going to Europe for 3 weeks, they said, Billy, their little dog who's tiny, would you, can we pay for Billy to come and stay with you? And I said, you won't pay, she'll come and stay anyway. So anyway, because you always had dogs. We only did 4-legged children. We didn't do 2-legged children. And some years ago, when Charlie, our last puppy, passed away, Karen McCartney, who used to write for a lot of the magazines, sent me a message saying, darling, what are you doing now that Charlie's passed away? I said, we take in friends' dogs. This is before COVID. When they're on holidays, and we jokingly call it H&H B&B. So Karen McCartney writes for the Good Weekend magazine, doesn't she? And she's writing about dogs in homes. If I was a dog living in Melbourne, I'd choose to stay at H&H B&B. So then we had all these people contact. I didn't know you set up a dog. I said, no. So no. Just in fact, we have one at the moment. We have Luna, whose mummy's in Bali at the moment, and they have to be allowed to sleep on the bed and be house trained. That's the condition. Anyway, H&H B&B.
That's wonderful. Sounds great. It could be your next project, one of them.
Oh well, no, we've got another one coming for the weekend, just for 2 nights, from the Malvern Hotel, and then we've got Miss Mimi coming. I've got a few bookings. They're coming back in.
Wonderful.
And spookily, when we were looking after Billy, this tiny dog, I got COVID. I'd actually been at Epworth for a small procedure and got COVID there anyway, And the first week in COVID, I was just wrecked. I was lying in bed and Billy would just sit on my tummy and look after me. And then when Gemma and Ryan came back from Europe, Gemma got it the next day, and I said, okay, look, Billy knows how to look after. And there's a photograph, they sent me a photograph of Billy sitting on Gemma's tummy looking after. Anyway.
That's wonderful, wonderful. Okay. We're going to finish up. We're going to have a little drink of something, and people don't normally have questions. But you may want to ask something now, or you may want to have a chat with Barbara afterwards. But does anyone have anything at the moment? Or we may finish up.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara, so much for coming in. You're just an absolute inspiration and delight, and I'm so glad that you exist in Richmond and Melbourne.
Thank you,
thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, we do have a question.
Finishing industry at David Jones in the little shabby soft finishing corner.
Oh my God! Oh my
Carolyn.
God!
Oh wow!
The soft furnishings. I remember when Mr. Torrance took me over to that floor in the old building in the Little Burke Street, and he said to me, what would you like? And I walked in, I thought, and it was trestle tables and lace curtains hanging across the window, and I thought, oh my God, I can't make it any worse. And that's when we were moving across the road, and it was actually an amazing time, and it was in Chinnery. Do you remember Bruce Chinnery? Gorgeous Bruce Chinnery. He was the soft furniture. He was the Manchester buyer, and he was the one who said to me, "Doll, it'll get you back into the industry," and it did, because it got me back into fabric houses, etc., etc. And it was really. And then we had. I'll just tell you a funny story. Do you remember Mr. Daly, Desmond Daly? Mr. Daly, I always call him Mr. Daly. He was a furniture buyer and giftware and so on. And one day I was at work, and Peter Nicol came to Mr. Nicol came. Mrs. Hermon, I've got something to tell you. Mr. Daly's just called you the fat tart who sells the rags. And I said, oh, really? And a few days later, we had in the executive dining room, we had Vogue magazine, Fashion Vogue, Vogue Living, and the Vogue people from Sydney down for lunch, and Mr. Daly was sort of chatting them up. And I said, oh, do you mean the fat tart who sells the rags, Mr. Daly? And he went, and it was so funny. Anyway, when he turned 90 a couple of years ago, and I sent him a birthday card, I said, dear Mr. Daly, we also called him the Silver Fox, happy 90th birthday from the fat tart who used to sell the rags. Anyway, so yes, but it was, it was an interesting time.
So you do have so many stories, Barbara. You have to do something with all those stories.
The stories overseas travelling, as I say, the brothel in Addis Ababa, and they thought I was the new arrival, things like that. But it was only $15 Ethiopian dollars for the night and the next day.
Oh, goodness me.
When I arrived, I'll just quickly tell you, I was investigating who to find in Ethiopia to buy handicrafts, and I found this man, Lieutenant Gurma, who was half Italian, half Ethiopian. And they sent one of the directors from Trade Action to meet me in Addis Ababa. You know, I'd come from Istanbul and I needed more protection in Istanbul. Anyway, Lieutenant Gomez said, I'm going to take you out for dinner tonight and we're going to meet my aunt and her daughters. And we thought, oh, that's nice. And when we drove up to this corrugated iron building with bright lights and wild music, I thought, this is a bit strange. And as we walked in, there were sort of lots of foreign men there sort of rushing out the door, and I said, oh my God, is this a brothel? And Peter Johansson said, don't tell my wife, don't tell my wife. I said, Peter, you're here to look after me, you know. And it was obviously a brothel. I mean, I'd never been in a brothel, but so we sat down and I said to Lieutenant, I said, this is a brothel? And he said, no, it's a place for young men to meet young women. I said, oh, yes. Anyway, there's an Ethiopian man came over and sat beside me, and he thought I was
available.
And you arrive at $15 for the night and the next day. I don't think so. It was actually quite sad because there were a lot of... Sorry? Oh, it was quite bad. But it was sad because I chatted to a couple of the young girls, you know, very young girls who had 2 or 3 children, you know, they'd been forced into this place. And not long after that, there was a program on the television, 5 Minutes to Midnight, and it was talking about... anyway, that was just one of the stories. I won't go on. That's
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Well done. That was lovely. Thank you, Barbara. Wonderful.